Hello. In this talk, I'll invite you to take a sex and gender version of the red pill from The Matrix. If you haven't seen it, The Matrix is a film about a man called Neo who starts noticing odd glitches in the world. These lead him to discover that he's actually living in a virtual reality created by evil robot overlords. Neo is given a choice. Take the blue pill and he'll forget the whole thing happened. Return to blissful ignorance, albeit as a human battery in a life-sucking biopod. But take the red pill and he'll become fully awake to the real world behind the veil of the robot's code. I took a sex and gender version of one of these red pills a few years back when I started researching the medical gatekeepers standing between transgender people and access to surgery. The science of sex woke me up to the fact that many things I'd thought were real about sex and gender were illusions created by coercive coding. Coding in the form of language, categories, and supposedly commonsensical ideas. Tonight, I invite you to take one of these red pills to wrap your minds around the science and also the distinct lack of science that inform two different futures I'll be discussing. One future in which there are multiple sex and gender categories, and another future in which there are none. But let's start in the present. In a small town in the Dominican Republic, where three types of people exist: females, males, and huevedoses, which translates as penis at 12. Thanks to some truly amazing biology, between 1% and 2% of babies in this village have female genitals at birth, but grow a penis and testicles at puberty. The same thing has been observed in parts of Papua New Guinea, Turkey, and Egypt. The huevedoses remind me of the Matrix because while they may look like glitches, like just a few people's faulty biology, they actually offer a tantalizing glimpse into how things really are. Now, this may come as a shock, but for many years now, many scientists have recognized that dividing humans into just two sexes does not reflect the reality of our biological diversity. And this is not a reference to the diversity of our gender identity, our gender roles, or the type of folk who catch our attention on Tinder, but to the diversity of our actual physical makeup, reproductive anatomy, hormones, brain activity, brain structure, even chromosomes. None of these can easily be categorized as just one thing or another. In other words, a binary. Even a simple continuum with woman at one end and man at the other doesn't cut it. Instead, the many crisscrossing lines of sex difference biomarkers look more like a Jackson Pollock painting. It's true that some of these biological markers cluster around what we call the female and the male sex, but many of us have biological markers of both sexes in varying degrees. In fact, up to 5.3% of the population may be born with a degree of intersex. That's 1.3 million Australians, or 1 in 20 of us sitting here tonight. Go on, take a subtle glance around. But as you look for people with sex characteristics, consider pulling out a mirror. Because apart from obvious signs like infertility, intersex people experience, many of us may not even know whether or not we're intersex. As sex verification debates in the Olympics show, there is currently no scientifically accepted gold standard to determine who here tonight is female and who is male. And just to make things even more complicated, The biomarkers of sex difference intersect with our gender identities, our sexual preferences, our psychologies, and our social contexts to produce not two types of human, but a stunning smorgasbord of potential people. So let's return to the matrix, take the red pill, and watch the code crash. Because what's binary is not sex and gender. It's our concepts. The artificial code that we've created to prop up the illusion that the entire human race can be divided into pink people and blue people. Today, our communities already include men who menstruate, women with prostates, and an increasing number of folk who tick the other gender box on government forms. So what's next? Where will sex and gender be in 100 years' time? Predicting the future is a fraught exercise, and so often we get it so very wrong. Not just Jetson's flying car wrong, commuting by whale bus type wrong. And this is a postcard from the 1800s predicting we'd all be Ubering by sperm whale in the year 2000. Experts in the field of future studies, the yin to historians yang, predict the future will include multiple sexes and genders, some of which may or may not be involved in reproduction, engineered private parts that don't look, function or feel anything like our current models, and even recreational sex and gender switches that might allow, just say, a middle-aged academic to change herself into a smoking hot dude just for Friday nights. With all these changes, the type of sex we'd be having would be pretty different too. We're already on the cusp of smart sex bots, haptic bodysuits, long-distance kissing, a technosexual revolution. Predictions for the future include body mods that could add sex organs anywhere that took our fancy, electronic body sharing and hacking that would mean we could sleep with our best friend's partner as our best friend, climaxes that are as simple as pressing Control-Alt-O, kinky sex bots that find the idea of threatened hard disk erasure hot, and of course, the 3D printing of replacement appendages should any of the wild robo-sex get out of hand. All this may sound very exciting or very alarming, or maybe a little of both. But as a professional nerd, what I wonder is not just what these future people will get up to after they've swiped right, but how they will choose to categorise themselves. Much of the current discussion about the future of sex and gender uses distinctly retro language that is already passé here in 2019. Predictions of technology that would allow women to experience the world as men, for example. These remind me of those steampunk whale cars, all mechanical propellers and windable handles. The possibilities those 19th century futurists imagined were equally inspired and constrained by the steam-powered paradigms of their day. But just as being able to see our home from space gave us a perspective to finally shake the impression the Earth was flat, we now have, or at least are coming much closer to having, the science and technology to show us the big picture about sex and gender. And as we've discussed, that picture is beautifully inscrutable, a sort of Rorschach test. One way forward would be to keep adding letters to the LGBTQI+ alphabet soup and proliferate sex and gender categories to the 50+ options Facebook offered us back in 2014. But I don't think attempting an exhaustive catalogue of all possible human forms is either feasible or useful. So what else could we do? How about going minimalist and dumping those fictitious and scientifically discredited sex and gender categories altogether. To see why less is more, consider Lego. Jack Halberstam offers a lovely Lego-inspired vision of the way future people might build and unbuild themselves. Sure, Lego sets come with instructions, and sometimes we might even use them. But the true joy of Lego is freestyling, constantly putting things together and pulling them apart, working with the blocks we've got to construct and deconstruct people and places that defy all names and definitions. If we stick with this analogy, the future is not female or male or yet more categories, but something more along the lines of the trans asterisk, that symbol that indicates a wild card in internet searches and offers us a glorious horizon of possibilities rather than yet more claustrophobic categories. In my view, the most humane, helpful, and scientifically sound way forward is to imagine a future not of females, males, and a list of TBA others, but of people. One category to reflect the singularity of all the individuals who belong within it. The beauty, though, is you don't even need to wait for the future. If you take the red pill, accept the amazing science of sex and gender, and take a closer look at those Lego blocks, you'll see that we've been building people and not women and men all along. We've just been too transfixed by the code to notice. Thank you.